Warehouses around the world are underutilized by 95%. In the US, warehouses can generate 200 terawatt hours, fulfilling 100% of data center demand. Imagine the potential if we can fully utilize these rooftops.
Your trusted source for information on the energy transition. This is the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. Welcome to another edition of the Insider's Guide to Energy. I'm your host, Chris Sass, and with me is co-host Jeff McCauley. Jeff, what do we have happening today?
Chris, it's great to be here as always. We're talking about another innovative solar financing and deployment model on an international stage. With us today, we have John Mushriqui, CEO and founder of InRange. John, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about the company and what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, InRange is a enterprise power procurement platform where we turn commercial rooftops into a new flexible energy asset class. Taking a look at the problem with the commercial rooftops, underutilized globally underneath, 10%. What we look to do is fully utilize these rooftops and use them not just for self-consumption, but to aggregate the excess energy and supply it to nearby commercial customers.
Great. And John, for folks listening in the US, this will be a familiar idea under two structures. One being net metering or net energy billing, a bunch of different names in the US, and another might be community solar. Your primary sites are initially international. Is that right? Tell us a little bit about the markets and the regulatory construct under which you're doing this.
Sure. Yes, we are currently operational in the UK, looking to expand in the Netherlands and several other countries in Europe. And quite simply, we are using the current regulation in the market where we're able to take the surplus energy, sleeve it through the existing grid network into other off-takers of energy, as opposed to them buying it from a large-scale solar. They buy it from what we call distributed solar farm off of the top of these rooftops.
So why is this new? It seems so logical, right? Oversize the system or size it to fill the roof. If that exceeds the load, sell it back to the grid. No problem. Why is this hard? Why is it new?
It is not new. It is hard, but it's not new. What we've done basically, and I think we were, if I quote a Wall Street Journal feature of InRange, we basically brought the most simple technology, solar panels and rooftops, and put them together. It is hard because there's multiple stakeholders. Every rooftop, there's a difference between every rooftop and the other. The unit economics don't pan out currently within this model, but if you ask any large energy buyer as a data center, tell them, I'm going to aggregate excess energy from commercial rooftops and sell it to you, the first impression is they will laugh at you. They will laugh at you because they think, that's not a lot. That's a drop in the bucket for us. That's first of all. Second of all, it is extremely complex to get that. But if you take a look at the surplus energy, that equates to 100% of data center demand in the US and in the UK. So how can you streamline that process? How can you get the multiple stakeholders for it to be a win-win situation between landlord, between tenant, and off-taker of energy? And it all boils down to a financial equation.
Are there certain size rooftops where the economics work, where you have so many square meters, or there's got to be an economy of scale to make it worthwhile? So what size commercial building are we looking at?
Of course, we like to look at rooftops that are 100,000 square foot of size and above, so larger square foot on that rooftop. But it's not just about the size. The other metric that goes into is how much is behind the meter and how much is exported to nearby energy customers. So, for example, where you have 5% behind the meter and you have 95% export, that is such a hard asset to unlock. But when you have a different mix where it's 40, 60, 50, 50, the unit economics start to improve and pan out.
And then in the US, interconnect has always been a problem. going, it sounds like a great idea, but then when you go do the paperwork and start working on it, it is a long process, even if it's fairly streamlined, to make this actually work. How is this different than maybe the UK or some of the other markets that you're looking to enter?
Yeah, so I mean, if you take a look in the UK, for example, DNO or distribution network operation connections, by law are required 3 months. So they need to respond within a 3 month time frame, if that makes any sense. The way we believe in streamlining this process is a data play, the ability to be able to share data with distribution network operators ahead of time, the buildings that want to be connected, and see how this pans out for them from an overall designing and planning perspective. So if there's an area that has congestion, for example, that they don't want that export, we roll out on that perspective. But there's another important aspect as well. If you want to talk about interconnection and grid connection, if we are able to manage that this asset class becomes part of what we call security of supply. So when a planner and designer is designing, puts that into their plan, then you reduce the congestion that's coming from the transmission level to the distribution level, hence improve the grid connection process. So it's not just about, project financing, solar and installing it. From our perspective, it starts out with data, and how do you accelerate this process with data for both the decision maker on the financial side, but for the grid connection as well.
It sounds wonderful. And I just want to make sure I heard you right, that by law, interconnection can't exceed 3 months in the UK. Is that right?
It's for them to give you a grid connection offer. They have 3 months on the distribution network level. Let's just be clear, not on transmission level, and that's one of the advantages that we see in this. So if you take a look, you're competing with a 100 megawatt solar farm. How long is it going to take you to build a 100 megawatt solar farm and get the interconnection versus the aggregated, 100 buildings at 1 megawatt each?
That seems to be a very rational and reasonable approach, and maybe something that's possible in lower solar penetration markets like the UK. We see that there's strong pushback as you increase the level of solar on a feeder or in a market, to the point where you're not allowed to export at all in extreme cases like Hawaii. But it sounds like with a collaborative approach with the distribution system operator, you can actually find places where they're willing to take excess generation, and it's not limiting your deployments.
Yeah, first of all, I think a collaborative approach is key to this with the system operator, with the energy buyers. But I mean, a point to clarity is, although we're using what I call, like in the UK, you're using the tube or the subway to transport the energy from point A to point B, that is going to that B customer right there. So if that B customer is on the same distribution network level, in essence, they can be reducing the grid and playing a more important impact for that operator,
Mhm. There's
which
another
requires collaboration and coordination.
Yes, and there's another key stakeholder which you mentioned briefly, which is the retailer, or who is the intermediary through which you're sleeving the excess power. Is that going straight to the wholesale market? Is it going back to a utility or a load serving entity? How does that work?
Yeah, yeah. So the way we operate is we operate with your existing retailer as an energy buyer, that we sleeve the energy through them, designation to X buyer. So whether it's data center Y or retailer X, in designation to that buyer. So if your retailer is billing you $10 or £10 a month, and we're selling them five, they would just deduct it, and we would bill them the five directly.
And come back to the math for us, because part of the reason why I think this isn't more common in the US is you might be able to sell power behind the meter for 10, 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And in many markets, it's a tenth of that for the wholesale market. So it's a huge difference between the value capture in retail versus wholesale. So if you're selling 40, 50, 60% back to the grid, how does that actually fund enough to finance the project?
And in range, we call that the blended rate. That's why I said that mix between behind the meter and export is important. So for us, We look at an electron, whether behind the meter or export, as an electron. And what's important for us, what is that blended rate, and how does that feed into the unit economics of a project, the IRR, the payback, and the return. And that blended rate is what has to drive that. So one is about that blended rate, but then the other point is, how do you eliminate and reduce these costs? If you really want to make this what we call, and we have pride in this, a new energy asset class for enterprise energy customers, you have to be able to reduce that transaction cost of distributed energy. If you compare the transaction cost of distributed energy versus utility scale, you're going to find that there's circa around 30 to 40% cost difference. And for us, automating that process, the end-to-end process from the feasibility to the project financing, is how you're able to reduce that cost and compete on the utility scale level.
Great. Tell us more about the role of technology, because it seems like it's not just the business model innovation, it's not just the structural, the contracting, the multi-stakeholder engagement. It's some sort of technology platform that you have that makes that process easier.
Yeah, I mean, technology is what weaves that all of the nice stuff that you just listed: the contracting, the project financing, the sale of energy, and so on. And it starts from the feasibility of the project and what assets we look at. We look at distributed energy as or buildings as a portfolio. We're not interested in one building. So when you work with a tenant or a landlord that has 1,000+ buildings, how are you able to analyze these buildings, and what is the building that you're supposed to go start with, rollout strategy, plan strategy, and so on, and how does that fit into that marketplace, into the off taker? And that uses our platform to be able to analyze that. Now, there's a lot of people that do that analysis, but when they do that analysis, what do they look at when they look at a building? They look at the building on the basis of, here's the potential generation. Let's match that with the on-site consumption. We have a fundamentally different start point. We're like, how much can you maximize this rooftop for? And then from that maximum generation, how are you able to distribute it to achieve the unit economics and what we called earlier the blended rate? And then it becomes a distribution model from there.
You talked about working with owners with multiple buildings, so maybe a REIT or somebody that has a large commercial
Exactly.
portfolio. How different is the pro forma for a new construction than an existing building? Like how much more attractive might it be to work on the front end? Is, if we're building a new distribution or warehouse or manufacturing facility, are the economics significantly better on the front end than going and retrofitting this?
100%. It's cost. I'll give you simple things. Scaffolding costs, they're already there. They're already there. You eliminate a lot of that cost from your cost per kilowatt peak or megawatt peak. So that fundamentally achieves the unit economics. But we have a lot of built environment. We have a lot of distribution warehouses that, guess what? They have single digit adoption rates on it globally, not just in the UK.
And then what kind of length of term does a tenant need to be in the building for the economics generally work? Obviously, it's a function of how much power they use. But, rule of thumb, or, if your sales team's out there talking to folks, hey, I've got 10 years left on this renewal. Am I good?
I mean, do you want me to answer that on the basis of how the market perceives it, looks at it, or how we look at it? Because we fundamentally believe that is a key problem, tenant landlord engagement, that stopped adoption. So the market takes a look at it. You need a PPA with the occupation tenant to be 25. So what ends up happening is that landlord tries to say, listen, we're willing to put that solar panel, but hold on, can we increase the lease of your length or the value of that lease in order for it to make sense? Well, we say, we don't need to do that. You're making your asset, you're improving the valuation of your asset, you're improving the unit economics on that asset from the uplift of that revenue that coming from that sale of energy, but making it attractive to any other tenant. And in turn, what we do as InRange, we guarantee the offtake for 10 years for the full generation. Even if the tenant leaves the building and the tenancy becomes void, because of our ability to take that excess and supply and sell it to nearby customers. But the point that you asked is a fundamental problem.
What I think I heard you say then is basically the landlord pays for the infrastructure and you manage this for some period of time. Is that the model that's happening? So the finance and all that is from the landlord?
We have two models. At the end of the day, we believe financing is a major hurdle to unlock this asset class. And there's some landlords that want to invest their own capex. And there's some landlords that want to use what we call our embedded finance model. So we've unlocked over 100 million of a credit facility to be able to roll out on these facilities, but provide flexible financing models, both from the landlord putting up their own capex, and then we become the solar operator for the length of the asset, 25 years or whatnot. And the same model goes if we are financing the asset.
So the dumbass question, which I'm really good at these questions, is one of the sales things you're telling Mr. Owner, your property is going to be more valuable in the future because you have this resource as part of your performa. And you said we're in single digits acceptance today. At some point, this is table stakes anyway, so it's not a differentiator anymore, right? So if 10 years down the road, I'd expect a lot of rooftops to have solar. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I believe the nature of the asset, right? It's an intermittent resource. It's complex. It's not real estate. It's not as simple as a lease. And for a lot of REITs and a lot of landlords, that is a risky proposition that they don't want to entail. And so simplicity to us, yeah, simplicity is what we believe one of our values, right? So how can we make this a very complex proposition quite simple and straightforward to a landlord and REIT, just as simple as leasing your warehouse.
John, you've clearly done a lot of work on this. Can you tell us some examples, either customers you've announced or numbers of deployments? You mentioned dollars of potential funding. Where is this actually being put to use?
Yeah, I mean, I'd nicely like to, or proudly like to say that this is not just a theory. So we've signed an agreement, it's in the public domain, with one of the largest UK retailers, a organization by the name of The Range. There's no relationship in between us and them other than a commercial relationship. We've started out with rolling on 2 of their buildings using, again, our technology platform, simplified approach. They loved it. And they went on and turned around and gave us an additional 30 buildings with 40 megawatt capacity, which we're currently rolling on. That's one example from a generation. We obviously generate on their buildings. We sell them behind the meter, but a lot of that surplus goes to Iron Mountain data center, which again, we made an announcement of our partnership with them in the public domain. So if you take a look at these 2 examples, these are prime examples of large enterprise customers that it's a win-win situation for the Range, where they're reducing their energy costs. Their landlord is making an uplift in revenue, but for Iron Mountain as well, they're offsetting and hedging their energy risk. And more importantly, what's important for them is the impact on the local community that they're having by their ability to offtake that surplus. Because in a lot of worlds, people can say that if you don't have an offtaker to offtake that surplus, these on-site generation wouldn't have seen the light of the world.
Does storage play into your situation? So maybe I have off takers at certain times, but the market may not need that. On a sunny day, there may be a lot of rooftops producing a lot of energy, and as time goes on, there may be less demand for the offtake. So have you built storage in any of these yet, or is that a near-term desire or not part of the plan?
Well, that is definitely part of the plan. That's going on one of our sites right now, a large distribution facility. I'd like to say it's a 1.1 million square foot distribution facility where you can install 11 megawatts on it, and a battery is a must to be there. Not only for the unit economics, but to be able to support behind the meter more, to be able to export more. But it's not just about that; it's full electrification of that CNI space. So right there is where we're going to put an EV charging hub, and an EV charging hub where off the solar panels and the battery, you'll be able to supply that because there's a lot of electrification happening nearby with a lot of warehouses.
Great. John, you mentioned your first deployments in the UK, and there's a lot of reasons why that makes sense. Are there other countries you're targeting? Are you thinking about the US market? And are there key thresholds that are important in order for you to enter these markets?
Yeah, I mean, we love to follow our clients. We structurally set up our business to work with clients that are either pan-European or global clients. So we'd like to follow both on the demand and supply side. And if you take a look at it, that's clustered into our 2 asset classes, where you have large warehouses and large data centers. And in Europe, these are countries like Netherlands, Spain is a growing market. Germany is a market there as well. Netherlands is by far one of our more eminent expansion plans, just because demand has been pulling that from our key customers. But to us, it's about matching supply and demand and creating a flexible energy asset into what we call a new energy asset class.
Wonderful. Well, we've talked a lot about the business and the industry. John, tell us about your personal journey, your founding journey to identify this opportunity to build the company and get some of the first deployments.
Yeah, so I've been building businesses, when I graduated from Temple University out in the States, and aerospace and defense, and consumer marketplaces. And my last gig was I got brought on to build a very special function in BP, which was a private equity play that sat alongside the CEO of BP at the time. And it was building what will be the future digital renewable businesses in BP. And I came across multiple energy opportunities, but that's when I, fell in love with the potential that energy has on our community in general, but in specific in enterprise power procurement. And what I've realized shortly is no matter how long you've been working in this industry, it's overly complex. You speak to people that have been in this industry for 15, 20 years and have been doing this. And I thought I didn't understand what I was doing. I still don't probably understand what I was doing, but they were all, trying to get and solve a massive problem. And that attracted me. And I said, hold on, there's a lot of friction points for energy buyers. They're all struggling to access affordable, stable, add on top of that renewable energy. Yeah, I see a massive amount of untapped potential when it comes to these commercial rooftops. And I'm not just talking for self-consumption. What really gets me out of bed is what you can do with that surplus and the impact that has on the occupational tenant for that self-consumption, but the impact on the overall unit economics.
It's compelling, John. And for those who are listening, who are maybe at the beginnings of their career or maybe looking at a career transition coming from the tech industry, what advice do you have for those listeners who might be looking for ways to put their skills to use?
First of all, find what you're passionate about. There's a lot of problems, to solve. Find what you're passionate about and what you're good about it, and start in whatever way, whether that's from right at the bottom, or launching a company, or joining a mission. That would be my 2 cents of advice. Anyone that's interested in a very complex problem, we are looking for what we call 10xers, or people that raise the bar for us.
Is there a transition moment or something that's going to take place that will drive your business? What is there a gate right now keeping that single digit percentage of acceptance rate, whether it be financing or standard terms or contract that everyone just uses? What puts gas on the fire, so to speak, or accelerates the deployment of this kind of solar?
I know a lot of people talk about regulation changing, and people talking about buildings here and the government pushing on there. I'm a big believer of the complete opposite. I'm a big believer that the way this really takes off is we make a highly compelling proposition that it's hard to say no. A highly compelling financial proposition that is absolutely hard for any business to say no to.
And how far is that gap today where it's a no-brainer, so to speak, where your CFO looks at it and goes, geez, it's not just hedging or shaving a few points once in a while. 50% of our energy we use, 50% is going to waste. Let's sell it. And the numbers, this thing just makes so much sense.
I would say my pessimistic self, or the self that would challenge our team, I'd say we're probably 50-40% away from that skyrocket growth, if that's what you're talking about.
So what is it that's compelling today? Is it the smaller numbers? What gets that CFO to sit with one of your team members and say, hey, let's move ahead with this project? Like, what percentage of improvement are we looking?
It's the improved unit economics. I mean, we say to our clients, at minimum, you will improve your revenue if you're a landlord by 25%, and at minimum, you reduce your energy costs by 25% if you're an energy buyer. So that is the first step that gets someone to sit on the table with us.
And what about the utility who you're sleeving the power through? What is the economic attraction to them? Is it not building a new substation, or are there economic upsides to their bottom line as well that they're focused on today?
Yeah, I mean, there are several. I mean, the first, if I'm very honest with you, the cost of customer acquisition and not losing their large energy buyers that want to do that. That is fundamentally the current driver. There's obviously what you call sleeving fees and shaping fees and so on, but these are not hefty. These are not what will get them out of bed. But what we found out when we get a customer to say to their utility, listen, we want to sleeve energy through InRange, they love the model because they don't generate 100% of their energy, and they say, hold on, can we offer you to our other clients? So I think, customers are more and more becoming in this industry in the driver's seat, which we love to see. We believe this, one of our key value props is being customer centric and fulfilling that to the customer, which is, I would like to say, in the previous world, uncommon. It's not that common in the energy world. But I think the more utilities see value propositions for their customers, we don't want to compete with them. Our business is not to compete with them. Our business is to be able to provide more energy, clean energy to these customers in a very simple manner.
And then the other thing that comes to mind, I think of companies like Prologis or these large landholders being someone that would work with you. And I've met plenty of people in their energy teams now in-house. Is there a point where they go, hey, this is so significant to our future business, perhaps we need to do this in-house because we've got a huge global footprint of real estate, and maybe it's in our interest to have a team in-house to do this? Is that something that's within reach of some of these, or is it too complex, like you and Jeff were saying, with the software and the management of the finance? There's a lot of moving parts to do this. It's not as easy as it seems at the surface. But is that a risk that this goes in-house to the larger REITs that maybe have enough economics to have and support a team?
Yeah, very good question. I mean, we work with all types of REITs or landlords that have an in-house energy team and that don't even have a procurement team, right? So we work across the end of the spectrum, and in all these cases, we look to be an extension to these. Whether they have an energy team, we look to be an extension. We call, we give you superpowers, whether it's through our platform, through our technology, through enablement, to enable that energy team to deliver on their targets and their goals. Or if you don't have one, we become that energy team. So in either way, we find our a compelling value proposition. And to be very blunt with you, when a REIT has an energy team, we are super delighted because they understand this asset class, they understand the risk, they understand the potential, and guess what? They fundamentally see the value proposition that we're driving to.
So my last question, because this has been a great conversation, is when do I see you in earnest in the North American market?
Find us a customer that will get us there, and we'll be there tomorrow. But I think, look, I think we love the U.S. market. We see great potential in the U.S. market. To us, it's about the right entry in the right market. We believe that's obviously going to start in a deregulated market where our customers want us to be there. So we're hoping that is in the near future. We're speaking to a lot of customers. We have a lot of U.S. customers with European bases that we're already speaking to. And it has to be the right market for us to start where we're actually solving a pain point for our customers.
Wonderful. Well, John, you've really given us a great tour here through what should be obvious opportunity, and through relentless entrepreneurship and sales and creative technology, you're figuring out how to extract that value. And then what's really important, I think there's a lot of hand wringing in the US currently about NEM and community solar, and you're not waiting for those regulations or relying on them, and showing a way in multiple countries where we actually can make maximizing solar on rooftops really pencil. So thank you for that vision and the work that you're doing. It was great to have this conversation today.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
For our audience, we hope you enjoyed this content as much as we did making it. It's been another interesting episode. You can see all the different approaches to solving the energy problem, and there's a lot of space in the industry for folks to solve it in very different places and different niches that need to be solved, and this is a very important one. If you like this content, don't forget to subscribe, follow us, join our YouTube channel, and we'll see you again next time on the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. Bye for now.